All right, topic Tuesday. So this one was written by Adam. He wants um, to share, compare, and contrast some different surgical approaches for the treatment of an acute type A aortic dissection. So now we're back into serious mode. Okay, so first we're going to do a quick anatomy review, and remember that a type A dissection, it's anything that involves the ascending aorta, which really means that part that travels upward from the heart. That is the only ascending part because it's going up. It doesn't matter how far down the aorta the dissection involves for it to be considered a part A. If it involves that area, it's A. It can go all the way down in the iliac, it's still considered A. If it doesn't involve the ascending, then it's B. Okay, so it's ascending, ascending, B. We got that from Dr. Udelman. So let's take a look again at a very big picture of the aorta, right? So this is where it would meet up around the heart, where your valve would be. See, that kind of looks like a valve. You have a branch coming off here to the right coronary and one to the left coronary artery. This is the ascending. It's coming up and out from the heart. So any dissection that occurs here, that makes it a type A. And then you've got your three branches that come off of the arch: brachiocephalic artery, and then that branches off into the right subclavian artery and the right common carotid. Then you have the left common carotid artery here, and then the left subclavian. So it looks like the right side has an extra little branch. Then you've got the arch. So those are coming off of the actual arch. Then you have the descending aorta, okay? This is still considered thoracic, but then it eventually hits an area that becomes the abdominal. That leads into iliac towards your legs, okay? We are talking about type A, which means we're talking about anything that started here, okay, in the ascending. So I just showed you this. The aorta has many important branches that come off of the arch and supplies the brain. These include the I love these words Adam uses, especially when I don't practice them ahead of time. Innominate artery, which supplies the right arm and the right side of the brain, the left common carotid, which supplies the left side of the brain, and the left subclavian, which also supplies blood to the left brain and the left arm. So as you can imagine, treatment of a type A dissection will depend heavily on how far the disease aortic tissue travels and whether or not these head vessels are actually included in that type A. That really does impact the treatment plan, because you're talking about something that is a lot easier if it doesn't versus something that gets more complex if it does. So a link was included to a great paper that was published by, Adam, you got to pick things that have easier words for me to pronounce. Dr. Dufendock? Sounds good to me. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. And some colleagues. And basically, this article details some great details about different methods that are used to repair an acute type A aortic dissection with highly educational images. These are pretty cool, right? So right there in the ascending only is a hemiarch. These are so detailed, right? Total arch would be up here, where it would deal with two of those branches. And this is called total arch with frozen elephant trunk, okay? I like his word firstly. I don't know that I've ever heard that word before, firstly, but it's creative, right? So if a dissection only includes the ascending aorta and stops before it affects the arch vessels that supply the blood to the brain, a standard hemiarch repair can be done. And this will involve resecting the diseased tissue up to the great vessels, which would be in the arch, and replacing it with a carefully sized piece of Dacron graft. How many of you have had that? Finger nubs. How many of you have had that? A lot of you, because I've met a lot of you online. So a lot of us have had that. Actually, I'm not even sure if that's considered more common, but I know a lot of you have had this. The big thing that you need to remember when it comes to a hemiarch is that the arch vessels are left intact. Nobody's touching anything that has to do with the arch. I know that's what I personally had. The arch does not get touched, okay? Cool, look at that. Beveled anastomosis of the two grafts. So this is just so interesting. So a lot of things going on here. A lot of sutures of that graft. The ends are called the anastomosis. It's where the natural tissue is attached to the graft, just so you know what anastomosis means. But when patients develop more extensive dissections, which actually travel up to the arch and include the great vessels, a total arch replacement is indicated. And here is an example of that. Okay, so we've got a lot of different things going. Look at all this stuff. There's too much going on. Let me explain everything. The arch vessels can be disconnected from the aorta that is diseased, and then they get reconnected to a branched graft system. We've seen examples of these. Many of the doctors that I interview, including Dr. Caterino from last week, held up a piece of graft that had branches, whether it was 2 or it was 3, that lead up to the brain and to the sides of the body. And that was for somebody who needed a total arch replacement because the dissection involved beyond just the ascending. So for a total arch replacement, the body is cooled down to 18 degrees Celsius to repair, to actually decrease the risk of any organ failure or organ damage as the blood supply from the aorta is cut off during the repair, which is interesting because I was cooled down too. So now I'm not really sure what happened to me, but I do remember reading that. And I know a lot of people get freaked out when they read that, but you get warmed back up. You're sleeping. You don't know that you got cooled down. It's just I think it's a cool thing, pardon the pun, to read about what happened to my body. Did I find it was cool almost 10 years ago? No, I totally freaked out. I had to keep reading the name on the medical record to be like, they're talking about me. I think we only think it's terrible because we watch shows like Grey's Anatomy or whatever, where it just seems like it's so bad. It's just part of their routine. It's part of what they have to do. You have to cool the body down to 18 degrees to remove the risk of any organ damage, right, from a lack of blood supply. All right. Look at all this is going on. It's a lot of scissors. It's pretty cool. A lot of clamping going on. I swear one of these days when I go to these medical conferences, I want to don a scrub and I want to wear gloves and I want to work on like pig valves. And I can't wait. I digress. All right. There's a lot of words here. I'm going to try to explain what's going on. This is a trifurcate graft, which probably means it goes out into 3 vessels, held tight with over arterial cannula with clamps. So it is clamp. Distal aortic anastomosis. This is where the graft is actually being attached to our tissue, to our actual tissue. There's your right carotid, your right subclavian, your left carotid. So you can see for this total arch replacement, it involved 2 vessels here. So they had an anastomosis because it went still into our natural tissue of the left carotid and into the left subclavian. And look, they just do that, like hand stitch it. It's amazing to me. I'm fascinated. Finally, for patients whose aortic dissections extend beyond the arch and travel to the descending thoracic aorta, an elephant trunk technique may be used. And I'm thinking that's what this was because we have so many different things that are involved, unless there's another picture and I'm behind. No, I could be behind. That was the second one we described. Okay. Here, in addition to the total arch replacement, as described above, the surgeon may deploy a stented graft inside part of your aorta that travels downwards behind the organs of the chest. Because you remember the aorta, it looks like a candy cane, right? But that's not in front of the heart and it's not to the side of the heart. It goes behind the heart, closer to your back. But it will go behind the organs of the chest and the abdomen, and it's difficult to otherwise reach and remove from the body. So it's a lot easier to just deploy something than to have to actually go in and try to do surgery. And they don't go through your back. There is a technique, I think people in the community call it a shark bite. Well, they'll go around kind of sort of near the center of the chest, underneath the side around the rib cages towards the back, but don't quote me on that because I'm not a doctor. I'm just trying to remember what I've heard. But this is different from the ascending aorta and the arch, where the diseased aorta everyone can easily access or cut out. The use of an elephant trunk actually does 2 things. So 1, it helps to stabilize the dissected or dilated part of your distal aorta arch and the descending arch. And it helps facilitate a future secondary open or endovascular intervention to treat the rest of your aorta because it helps stabilize that and hold that open. So yeah, here it is. This is the picture where we were just talking about. We do have what you would have had in the total arch if it was just ascending arch and some of the branches. But here they've deployed that stent down into the part of the descending aorta that is dissected. This is a stent graft in the dissected aorta. So this is deployed in. This is attached to your aorta. This is put inside the aorta because you can see it's dissected. And this is opening up the true lumen, or the true area of that vessel where the blood is actually flowing. It's not opening up the fake one or the false. It's opening up the true so that the blood flow is flowing more easily. Okay. Trifurcate brachiocephalic graft. That's just doing a lot of things. We're going to read about that, I'm sure, in a moment. Conventional elephant trunk sewn into the distal aorta. So here is braided silk tether attached to distally in, I don't know how to pronounce that. It could be invaginated or it could be invaginated. I'm not sure. Can't wait to do pronunciation on Google with that word. Proximal end of aortic graft for retrieval. I have no idea how to pronounce half this stuff. I'm working really hard here. I'm trying. But this is totally different. So this isn't a stent. This looks like it's a graft that has been put inside. So let's learn about this one. Oh, he talked about that earlier, it looks like. But this, look how it's been deployed. They put something inside here. And that is, I'm just amazed. I need Adam to come on here and do some of these and just explain all these pictures to you and say the words correctly. But that's all he has for this week. Topic is a little more advanced than what he usually puts. No, really? Yes, really, very. But I think seeing the images makes it a little bit easier to understand and slowly start thinking about the anatomy of our aorta. No wonder they made it its own organ. It's got so many different potential disease elements that can happen in the different zones, whether it's ascending or arch or descending or abdominal, different ways of, but I mean, you could technically diagnose a little bit differently depending on the chest and the location, if it's abdomen or chest, and you definitely have different treatment options. So I just think it's so interesting, but check that out. Look at that mess. That's no longer a mess right there. Right? That's a pretty cool picture. Don't forget, anybody who's near Brooklyn, New York, as I mentioned earlier, we are doing the Aortic bridge walk across the Brooklyn Bridge, Sunday, September 15th, 11 a.m. at Camden Plaza in Brooklyn, New York. There's more information on aorticbridge.org, and you will also find that by the end of this week in our event section on our website, although I believe it is already posted on our event section on Facebook. It is free to register. You register in time, you will receive a free t-shirt. I can't remember what the colors are this year. Every year the t-shirt's different, and it's just a really wonderful, great time to be around a lot of medical staff and a lot of community members and their caregivers just coming together, walking around with their Think Aorta signs, and then coming together for lunch. So hopefully the weather doesn't rain. Last year was a washout, and hopefully it's also not 1,000,000 degrees because that's no fun either. But yeah, hopefully you'll join us. And thank you, Adam, for an extremely high-level post with some words I can't pronounce, but I found it very informative. I hope you did too. That's your Topic Tuesday.